Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time to go over a quick few things and all of the injuries from the prime slate of games here for Week 13. I have already covered the Thursday game in my Saturday special video, so those are bookmarked, so you could always just watch that little bit if you were curious about that game and those injuries. I also, throughout the week, in case you are finding this for the first time, a waiver wire video will come out early out on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday I will have videos for each position: wide receiver, running back, quarterback, and tight end for my rankings. Other than that, I try to keep everything as quick but still, not too quick as possible. So let's just hop right into today's video, starting off with Pittsburgh versus Atlanta, and they beat Atlanta 19-16 in a game that they pretty much had control of, but could never quite take any kind of dominating lead, and that is in part because Kenny Pickett just can't finish off drives. If he could, he would definitely be fantasy relevant, and one of these days he'll get over that hump, but just hasn't happened yet. And as far as his targets go, George Pickens, we may have thought his coming out party already happened and kind of anticipating it, but it just doesn't seem like that is quite going to be the case for this season as far as being able to truly rely upon him during the playoffs. Deontay Johnson is still the number one wide receiver there. Then as far as Atlanta goes, the opposite could be happening. Drake London may end up having some relevance here down the stretch. He got 12 targets today. I have to imagine that is by far the most targets he has gotten in any game this season. Maybe the team has done some thinking and said, hey, we just need to chuck it to Drake London. So if that were to be the case, that would be good going forward. So we'll keep our eye and see what happens next week as far as Drake London's target share goes, and hope that continues to be a trend. Then as far as Baltimore and Denver goes, it was a close one. Baltimore ended up winning 10-9. They were trailing most of the game, or I think at least most of the second half they were trailing. And that is just because they could not get anything going on the ground or just anything going offensively. And that's been a trend as of late for that offense. And it did not help that Lamar Jackson got injured fairly early on in the game, but it looked pretty much the same with or without him as far as the longevity of drives goes. After the game, the head coach did say that it was not a season-ending injury, so I don't know if that's good or bad that he had to express that, but probably, obviously better than it being a season ender, so that is good. As far as Denver goes, Greg Dulcich had 8 targets. He caught 6 of them for 85 yards, so he had a really, really good game. I finally kind of faded him this week a little bit last second for Dawson Knox too, so that's a shame. It'll happen. As far as Sutton goes, he did nothing, and that may be in part due to the return of Jerry Jeudy, who caught all 4 of his targets for 65 yards. Jerry Jeudy's back, decent game. Only 4 targets stinks, but that's that. Denver, it's not like it's a great offense to have players for anyways. Then as far as Green Bay and Chicago goes, Green Bay came back and then ended up kind of whooping up on Chicago by the end with a score of 28-19. Really took a second half rally for Green Bay. They were behind. Gosh, did Chicago score? Was it 19-10? 16-10 maybe at halftime, and Green Bay scored right before half in order to make it that score. So definitely turned things around in the second half. That was in part thanks to Christian Watson. Yet again, he continues to go on a tear. He had 2 touchdowns today, 46 rushing yards, 1 rush for 46 yards and a touchdown. And then he caught 3 of his 6 targets for 48 receiving yards. Also, A.J. Dillon was overutilized compared to Aaron Jones. He had more rushing attempts, had a few receptions out of the backfield as well. So that was interesting. I know both of them were a little bit banged up in practice this week. I don't know if Aaron Jones wasn't at full health, and that's part of the reason for it, or if they just rode the hot hand in the game. And as far as Chicago goes, Cole Kmet was the leading receiver with 7 targets as far as receptions go. Don't believe he was the leading yards getter. In a post-Mooney world, I would expect him to continue to have a lion's share of the targets going forward in that offense. Then Detroit held up their end in what we thought might be a high-scoring game this week with beating Jacksonville 40-14. Thought Jacksonville would be able to manage more than 14 even if they stunk, but they did not as far as Detroit goes. DeAndre Swift is back. He had 14 attempts in this game. He also had more rushes than Jamal Williams, also in reference to the previous team that we just talked about, and he also had 6 targets out of the backfield, so that is a great sign. And hopefully you saw my Saturday show if you're a DeAndre Swift owner and were thinking about sitting him, because I fairly highly recommended him. Said that I was believing all the good news coming out of Detroit throughout the entirety of the week as far as his usage increasing this week, and it worked out. As far as Jacksonville goes, it's an untrustworthy offense still, but we don't want to forget that this Detroit defense, for the last 4 weeks, I think it is, that I've been talking about this defense and that maybe we need to take it seriously. And I sort of forgot about that this week, just getting excited for what I thought would be a high-scoring back-and-forth game after Jacksonville kind of turned on the Jets last week on offense. But got a little overexcited for that, forgot about this Detroit defense. So keep our expectations where they've been for most of the season as far as this offense goes. Now, Cleveland ended up whooping up on Houston. Really no thanks to their offense or that new quarterback of theirs who shall not be named. They had 3 defensive and special teams touchdowns in the game. That's probably part of the reason that this offense really never got going. There were a lot of times, let's just say the offense struggled regardless of things, but they never had much of an opportunity, especially throughout the second half, to get things going. And so I've been warning about he who shall not be named for a while now as far as this game goes, and then you're not going to trust him next week. So just continue to hold him as a stash. There are a couple of good matchups right at the end of the season, and you can only hope that Deshaun Watson will have shaken off the rust by that point, especially if you're struggling at the quarterback position. He's probably worth a roster spot. I will have to make that decision with Kyler Murray. I think I'll be able to, I don't know, we'll see. And then as far as Houston goes, Dameon Pierce had a fine day, and that's about it from that offense that we can take forward. So it was nice to see a little bit of a return of Dameon Pierce. Then as far as Minnesota and New York Jets go, Minnesota ended up beating the Jets 27-22. They had a larger lead towards the end of the game, and then the Jets almost made a comeback right towards the end. A couple of good defensive holds by Minnesota prevented that from happening. All in all, there was a limited amount of fantasy points for a lot of the fantasy players for Minnesota, and that is in part due to the New York Jets defense. The ball was also spread around quite evenly amongst players, and in part that is due to the fact that they were able to have a balanced attack, and they got a short field on the field goal drive, which didn't take up much time, but they didn't get any yards on it either. So that helped to contribute towards a score that makes it seem like there could have been more fantasy points than ended up happening. Then as far as the New York Jets go, Garrett Wilson had 15 targets in this game. Corey Davis had 10 targets. So that's good to see from both of them for going forward. Zonovan Knight, Bam Knight, had a 6 yards per carry average. So I do expect that even if Michael Carter comes back, maybe Zonovan finds himself a role there, and that would just dilute that backfield to being pretty hard to trust or to expect some sort of upside from in that event. And there were also 7 targets for Conklin that were available, so that is good for him. Unfortunately, he only caught 2 of those and had 7 yards on those 2 catches, so it was not a good game for him. But as far as targets go, that's pretty good for a tight end, something that you want to see. Then Washington and the New York Giants went into overtime at 20-20, and they finished the game at 20-20. As far as Washington goes, Brian Robinson outcarried Antonio Gibson 21-9, and I would love to tell you that that's going to be a great sign for Brian Robinson going forward. However, Antonio Gibson did come into this game with an ankle issue. And so, did that contribute towards Brian Robinson's usage? I don't know, but I would say 3 of the last 4 games, Brian Robinson has done quite well. So, hopefully, he will be somebody that, if you need throughout the playoffs, you might be able to rely on. That's possible, but it would be nice to see one more week of that prior to most people's playoffs. And as far as the passing game goes for Washington, there was some pretty good numbers all around. And the New York Giants quarterbacks were decimated, so that definitely helped out things for Washington's passing attack. Then for the New York Giants, Daniel Bellinger came back, and in his first game back, he did have 5 targets, so that's not too terrible. Also, for their receivers, Isaiah Hodgins continues to be a part of this offense, and he had a touchdown this week, so obviously he had a decent fantasy day, and I do think that I swear he had a touchdown last week that got called back or something like that, because I looked and he didn't have a touchdown last week. But if anybody's aware of that happening or having not happened for sure, definitely drop a comment and let me know for sure. But he's a sneaky, I would say more so like maybe DFS guy down the road here for the New York Giants. Then Philadelphia whooped up on Tennessee 35-10. Miles Sanders owners should consider themselves lucky he got a touchdown, because otherwise it would have been a very ugly day. And just in general, though, this offense was clicking, and they just decided to throw the ball all day. As far as Tennessee goes, Derek he didn't have a great day. I was trying to make that sound like Henry somehow. I don't know. It sounded better when I wrote it. But Derrick Henry did not do much, unfortunately, and it might have been a different game if Treylon Burks did not get injured. Unfortunately, he had a big concussion on his only catch of the game, which was like a 25-yard touchdown, so at least he did okay, especially for the person who I recommended play him. They just looked like they were moving a little bit better early on in this game, and then it just didn't work out. Chigoziem Okonkwo did have a great game. Can you trust that going forward? Is he some sort of tight end that you should target? I don't think so. I did say before the season even started, he's going to have 1 or 2 games, a few huge plays that are going to possibly get people excited and riled up to grab him off of the waiver wire. But I think that this had more to do with, in part, Treylon Burks leaving the game, as well as how the Philadelphia defense probably played him. Their perimeter seemed to get totally shut down in this game, so I'm thinking that they just took advantage of what they could take advantage of towards the middle of the field, closer to the line of scrimmage, and that would be Chig. Then Seattle pulled it out against the Rams, surprisingly. Would have thought that they could have just beat them single-handedly easily, but they beat them 27-23. It was not an easy game for them to win. That being said, that's probably wasn't a bad thing as far as fantasy points goes. All the fantasy relevant guys on Seattle got fantasy points, except for, of course, the one who got injured, Kenneth Walker. Now, he had an ankle injury early on, didn't come back into the game. Still the leading rusher with his 3 carries in this game, so that's going to leave us with 2 options on the waiver wires if Kenneth Walker's not playing next week, and we definitely won't know that going into the waiver wires. So, Travis Homer did not play in this game due to a knee injury. However, he is next up on the depth chart. That doesn't always mean that they're going to be next up, but he and DJ Dallas are quite similar guys. So I would think that Travis Homer has the edge on DJ, but they probably would split the backfield with each other. Did look at the practice squad. I don't think that there is anyone that they would be trustworthy of over these two as more of a bruising back. Neither one of them are really big guys, but I lean towards Travis Homer, but DJ Dallas is probably going to be the guy that people are going to be recommending because he was the guy this week behind Kenneth Walker, because Travis Homer did not play in this game, but he was a late guy who got declared out. He was questionable. He was, on the edge of playing this week, so that's my quick take on the waiver wire impact of this Kenny Walker injury. Then for the Los Angeles Rams, I think that we are seeing what this running back core is going to be, how it's going to be utilized going forward, and that means Cam Akers is going to get to start the games, and he's going to be the guy as long as they're in the game, which they were for the entirety of this game. Kyren Williams is the guy for when they are way behind and losing. Unfortunately, Wolford showed in this game that he can run this offense. He can move the ball and get some points, and if their defense can do their thing, stay in the game. So this is a game where you would have thought that Kyren Williams would have been on the field more, because you would have thought that Seattle would have beat him by more, but just wasn't the case. And as far as Akers goes, he did have a really big day. Today, he had 2 touchdowns, 60 yards. I'm sure that is the best running back performance all season for the Rams. I would be careful about playing him next week. I don't know who their opponent is, but just in general, this offense has not done that too much. So don't get too excited about that. That's my takeaway from this game. Then as far as the San Francisco-Miami game, this did end up being 17 points. San Francisco whooped up on Miami, beat them 33-17. A late defensive touchdown did help make this look a little bit worse, but San Fran pretty much had control of this and had control of this Miami offense. Their defense did a nice job today, and I guess I did not take into account enough the fact that the left tackle, the missing tackle in Miami, how much of an impact that would have. I thought they would be able to overcome that and still have a great day, but was not how it turned out to be today. Jimmy Garoppolo did have a foot injury pretty early on in the game, maybe second quarter, that he was not able to come back. So Brock Purdy was the quarterback in this game. He did all right. Did pretty good. Christian McCaffrey, of course, did Christian McCaffrey things in the game, so he was pretty darn good. But Jordan Mason did come in relief quite a bit, split that backfield work a fair amount, and so that is something to keep an eye on. No, going forward, he would have been a waiver wire pickup for some this last week, so somebody that's probably worth holding on to. And then with Brock Purdy, I do believe from this game that Deebo Samuel might be the more valuable piece between him and Ayuk. Ayuk and Jimmy had a nice connection, but if Jimmy's going to miss some time, I just think that Deebo's a little bit more friendly for the shorter passing attack game that Brock Purdy was rocking throughout this week. Now on to Miami, and they just went with an all-out passing attack. We were worried about their running backs in this game, and rightfully so. They did worse than expected. It was not a good week for either Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson. And as far as Waddle goes, he did not have a great game either. He caught 1 ball for 9 yards, and he had only 5 targets. He was out of the game for a period of time, I don't know how long, and he got banged up. He did come back into the game, but that is almost certainly part of the reason for this stat line. Also, Tua got sacked near the end of the game, and I'm not 100% sure if this is when the ankle injury happened, but before the game was finished, they said that Tua Tagovailoa had an ankle injury, so I assume that it was that sack, but unfortunately we have no clue if it was bad enough for him to come back into the game or not, because the game was out of hand. So for like one play, I think Sky, the back quarterback, I think came in for like one play, so too early to tell there. Then our last game of the day, Cincinnati versus Kansas City, finished, and Cincinnati beat Kansas City 27-24 in a classically good game between the two. As far as Cincinnati goes, there's really nothing to pull from this. It was a great fantasy day for if you played any of those guys except for Hayden Hurst, who had a calf injury, then you had a good day. Hayden Hurst did obviously not come back into the game. Speaking of that, originally for the thumbnail, about halfway through the second set of games, I put a first aid kit as my picture instead of a player, because there were a lot of guys who got injured, but several of them ended up coming back into the games. A couple of tight ends, Jalen Waddle after half, or like right after I got done making that thumbnail. So I ended up switching it out, but there may be a few guys who got injured in the games today or yesterday when you're seeing this, who will have woken up this morning already and found themselves with some big-time swollen joints, unable to move them. So I won't be surprised if we end up finding out about some guys being questionable throughout the week who got nicked up throughout the games today, because there were quite a few injuries that guys went back out onto the field after today. Then let's finish this up with Kansas City, and Pacheco just keeps on going. Had 60 yards on the ground, so definitely not bad, and he got another touchdown, so definitely good. Then as far as Kansas City's passing offense goes, we've kind of given a pass to this offense all season, and they picked it up enough throughout the middle portion there, right as we were maybe going to get a little bit worried about it, but it's hard to trust these pass catchers beyond Travis Kelce, who didn't have a great day today either. I don't know. In real football terms here, I would be concerned as a Kansas City fan about if this team can make it to the Super Bowl. If this offense doesn't figure something out, if one of these receivers doesn't step up and take charge as a primary target that can take some attention away from Travis Kelce in these defenses and that can do some damage. So yeah, that's it for my observations from Week 13. Thank you very much for coming on through. Once, as I said in the beginning of the video, go on, check out my waiver wire video, my positional videos throughout the week. And thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you. Take care and have a good one. Bye-bye. Also, I hope you won your fantasy games.